Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today, and to my colleague Michelle Rempel Garner for joining me on this very important discussion. I'm Marc Dalton, Member of Parliament for Pitt Meadows, Maple Ridge. I'm here to talk about the issue of addiction, substance abuse, and the lack of accessible recovery treatment. Deaths from overdoses are in the headlines often, and rightfully so. Last year, a record 1,723 people died from overdoses in my home province of British Columbia. It's an absolute tragedy. But sadly, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Lurking behind is an even larger issue of substance abuse and addiction. Statistics Canada estimates that 21% of Canadians will battle substance abuse at some point of their lives. That's 8 million Canadians. In every province, every territory, every city, every town of our great country. Addiction is not a respecter of gender, of race or ethnic background, of position, of age, or of political preference. Almost all of us know someone close to us that has struggled or is struggling with an addiction to drugs or alcohol. A child, a grandchild, a parent, a relative, a friend, or someone dear to them or to you. It could be you. It could be me. Addiction brings brokenness, tears, pain, anger. In my riding of Pitt Meadows, Maple Ridge, I have wept with families who have lost their loved ones to addiction. There are those close to me who have friends and family who have died from substance abuse. But I also know those who have come through on the other side. They've been fortunate enough to access recovery treatment. I've been deeply touched as I've listened to inspiring stories of how their lives have been transformed. At one recovery shelter, a woman called Tiffany told me that after being an addict for 20 years, they have given me the tools I needed to love myself so I can go home and be the mother my children need. Another young woman told me that she had been addicted to drugs and supported her habit through sex. She said that she would have been dead if she hadn't received the help that she was now receiving. Unfortunately, many Canadians simply don't have access to recovery treatment, whether it's due to a lack of beds, prices that are too high, or a lack of support for their families while they undergo treatment. Help is not available when and where they need it most. The solutions to this are not simple. There are overlaps with a host of other social issues, including mental health, poverty, homelessness, and domestic abuse. The path starts with leadership, and I'd like to thank my caucus colleagues, Todd Doherty and John Barlow, for their respective leadership on mental health and the opioid crisis. Michelle, for your leadership on public health. And to our Conservative leader, Erin O'Toole, for including action on mental health as one of the 5 components of Canada's recovery plan. Now, I look for leadership from the House and from the Liberal government. And that's why I've introduced my motion 88, calling on my fellow members of the House to recognize that we've reached a crisis point and pleading that this government take action by developing and implementing a federal framework for addiction recovery treatment. There are many who need to be invited to this table. Provinces and municipalities and existing treatment providers to advise on best practices and long-term strategies. representatives from vulnerable populations, Indigenous communities, and those working with at-risk youth to develop targeted strategies. Employers to develop awareness and assistance programs, and federal representatives to develop increased temporary financial support options. Mesdames et messieurs, il y a des millions de Canadiens et de Canadiennes qui souffrent avec des addictions aux drogues et à l'alcool. Ce qu'on fait, ce n'est pas suffisant du tout. On a vraiment besoin de mettre beaucoup plus d'efforts et des ressources dans le rétablissement des toxicomans. Il faut un cadre fédéral. I am committed to being at the table for as long as it takes to see this implemented. Hundreds of thousands, millions of Canadians suffering from addiction deserve our very best collaborative effort. Thank you. Merci. Michelle, invite you.
Good morning. I'd like to start my remarks by acknowledging the horrific discovery of 215 children in a mass grave in a Kamloops area residential school. This atrocity is a stain on our country and is a clarion call to action. I'm also here today to acknowledge the work of my colleague MP Dalton with his motion, which is being tabled today. Canada's opioid crisis has claimed too many lives and destroyed too many families. And the stress and isolation caused by the pandemic has only worsened this crisis. The federal Liberals cannot continue to put this issue on the back burner. Months ago, Canada's Conservatives recognized that our country needs a new approach to tackle this crisis. And that's why we established the Conservative Opioid Crisis Working Group. We've approached our work with an open mind, knowing that the root causes of opioid addiction are multifaceted. Every aspect of our demographic in our country is affected, and as such, demands a holistic, comprehensive, and compassionate set of solutions. We have listened to countless individual Canadians, stakeholders, and experts. The results of this working group will inform our party's policy and platform on this issue, and today is the first step in that process. A national addiction recovery strategy, as outlined in Mr. Dalton's motion, is the framework Canada needs to implement policy to end this crisis. It outlines the principles for turning policy ideas into action, including working collaboratively with provinces, municipalities, and recovery providers, developing awareness programs and support for employers, and increased financial support for those in recovery and their families. Ultimately, we need to be compassionate, and this is the principle that is at the heart of Mr. Dalton's motion, which we firmly support. Thank you.
And we'll now take questions, starting with questions on the phone. Quick reminder to reporters, one question, one follow-up. Nous allons maintenant passer aux questions. Commençons par les questions au téléphone. Un petit rappel, une question suivie par journaliste. Opérateur, avons-nous une première question?
Thank you. Merci. Please press *1 on the telephone keypad if you have a question. N'hésitez pas à faire étoile 1 sur votre clavier téléphonique pour toute question. We have a first question from Cormac McSweeney from City News. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
My question is going to be off topic of what this news conference is about, but the world and Canada and our Indigenous peoples are in mourning right now over the 215 children who were found at the residential school site in Kamloops, BC. And I'm wondering whether the Conservative Party supports the calls from Indigenous leaders to have more investigations, more searches of different residential school sites across Canada to see whether there are similar situations at other sites.
More action needs to be taken. This is not a time for talk. We have to be listening and taking cues from First Nations leaders across the country on this issue. And this call for action needs to be supported across political lines. This discovery is a stain on our country. It is one that needs to be rectified out of respect for First Nation, Métis, Inuit It's hard for me to find words this morning, as I think a lot of leaders across the country are, but I think what people want is action, and I sincerely hope that that's something that Parliament is seized with this week.
And as a follow-up, the NDP will be calling for an emergency debate on this gruesome discovery. Will the Conservatives be supporting the motion for an emergency debate?
Yes.
Operator, next question.
Thank you. Merci. There are no further questions registered at this time. Il n'y a plus de questions en ce moment-ci.
And this concludes the press conference. Ceci met fin à la conférence de presse. Merci.
Thank you. The conference has now ended. Please disconnect your lines at this time, and we thank you for your participation.